I was still standing at the mailbox row clutching a notice so wet from the sprinkler it nearly tore in my hands. She, our HOA chair, had accused me of blocking a drain pipe, smirking as neighbors pretended not to look. 2 days later, the twist arrived: a county paper, a 0315 camera still, and an inspection note that sent water where she never planned it. The flagpole rope clacked in the breeze as I steadied my breath. "Let me take you back." The paper was damp from the sprinkler mist, edges curled, ink running where my thumb pressed. Across the top, in stern black letters, "Violation Notice." Underneath, in smaller print that somehow felt sharper, "Drain pipe alteration non-compliant with community standards." I stood by the row of mailboxes at the end of our cul-de-sac, the morning air still cool, heavy with the smell of fresh-cut grass. Birds were loud overhead, but I couldn't hear them, not with my eyes fixed on that word violation. A flicker of movement up the block. Elaine Hart, president of the Maple Glen Homeowners Association, was there with her arms crossed, cardigan neat despite the heat. She didn't wave. She didn't have to. Just the tilt of her chin said she'd been waiting for this moment for me to find the paper that called me out in front of everyone. My boys came skidding up on their bikes, Jason's sneakers scraping pavement. "What is it, Dad?" he asked. Liam and Emma Younger followed behind their wheels, wobbling as if even their bikes sensed the tension. I folded the paper once, then again, then once more until it was just a crumpled square. My hand was sweating. I could feel Elaine's gaze like a pin pressed between my shoulders. We slid into a booth at the diner a few minutes later. The place smelled of bacon grease and hot syrup, the kind of scent that normally grounded me. Today, it churned. The notice lay between the salt shaker and a rack of grape jelly packets. The waitress filled my mug, left a dark ring of coffee around it, and hurried off. Mia joined us, brushing Emma's hair back gently as she sat. "Evan," she said, nodding at the folded paper. "What now?" I took a sip of coffee that was already cooling. "According to Elaine, our drain pipe disrupts the visual harmony of the neighborhood." Jason snorted. "It's a pipe. It drains water. Who cares how it looks, Jason?" Mia warned softly. "Not so loud." Emma leaned forward, voice small but clear. "Daddy, why does she hate us?" The clatter of forks, the sizzle from the griddle behind the counter, all of it seemed to hush. Even Liam looked up from the puzzle placemat, pencil hovering. I didn't answer. My throat worked, but nothing came. On my way to the cashier, my eyes drifted to the bulletin board by the door. A brand new sheet was pinned in the center: "HOA reminder violations will be enforced promptly." Same font, same ink, the same cold efficiency that now sat in my pocket. Back outside, the air had warmed, carrying the faint metallic smell of sprinklers shutting off. Elaine's car crawled past her window down. She didn't say anything, but she gave the smallest, most satisfied nod. Jason kicked a pebble into the gutter. "So, what happens if we don't fix it?" I wanted to shield him from the truth about fines stacking like bricks, about certified letters landing on your porch like stones. But Mia answered instead, quietly. "We'll handle it. We always do." The rest of the morning drifted. Emma colored at the table. Jason sulked. Liam pedaled circles in the driveway. I walked to the corner of our lot where the grass grew high. Something glinted, a rusted metal cap half buried in soil. I crouched, brushed away dirt with my thumb. A survey pin, maybe. I'd never noticed it before. I straightened the violation still folded in my back pocket. Across the street, curtains shifted. I wondered how many neighbors had already seen Elaine plant the notice in my box. The humiliation spread wider than water ever could. It clung heavy and invisible. Emma's question replayed in my ears, quiet but sharper than any letterhead. Why does she hate us? I had no answer. Only the sense that this was not about a pipe, not really. I turned back toward the house, the pin glinting faintly behind me. The subject line hit me before I even opened the email. "Your complaint has been dismissed." I tapped it open with the thumb that trembled more than I cared to admit. The HOA's logo glared at me from the top of the message, crisp and official like marble carved into a screen. The words underneath were cold. "After review, the board has determined no corrective action is necessary. Community standards have been applied fairly. Applied fairly. Those two words were like grit between my teeth. I leaned on the kitchen counter staring until the letters blurred. The hum of the fridge filled the silence. Mia came up behind me, sliding her hand onto my arm. So that's it. They don't even bother explaining. They explained enough, I said. My voice was flat, but my jaw ached from holding it tight. Jason shuffled in backpack hanging from one strap. He glanced at the screen. You told them about the drain pipe, right? That it was like that when we bought the place. I told them everything, I muttered, thumbing the screen dark. Doesn't matter. The school bus groaned up the street brakes squealing. Jason kissed his mom's cheek and jogged out. Emma followed, clutching her lunchbox with both hands. Liam lagged behind his shoelaces, a tangled mess. Don't worry, Daddy, Emma said softly before stepping onto the bus. Maybe they'll be nice next time. I watched the yellow doors fold shut. Mia's sigh filled the kitchen. She shouldn't have to hope for kindness from neighbors. I couldn't sit still, so later that morning I drove into town. The post office smelled faintly of dust and ink the way it always had. Behind the counter the clerk waved, but I barely returned it. Outside, the big pump by the side wall kicked on humming low and steady. I stood there a moment, letting the vibration crawl up through the concrete into my shoes. It felt like the sound was inside me, steady but relentless. On the bulletin board near the entrance, flyers overlapped Lost Cat Church Choir potluck, and in the center a stapled page with the HOA's letterhead. Board Meeting Minutes, June 2020. My eyes scanned lines of dry text until one sentence grabbed me by the collar. Rules must be applied fairly across all parcels. There it was again, that phrase. This time not in a glossy email, but pinned with a thumbtack, public staring at me. I smoothed the paper, read the line again. My pulse beat in my ears. Back home, the thought clung like cobweb. That night, after the kids were in bed, I pulled down boxes from the garage shelves. Dust puffed into my nose. Old baseball gloves, a cracked snow globe, a box of Mia's college yearbooks. At the bottom of one carton sat a thick manila envelope labeled in black marker, "Closing Docs." I carried it to the workbench under the single bulb. Papers spilled mortgage slips, insurance policies, inspection reports. My hands shook as I sifted until at last I laid out the original deed. The paper was yellowed at the edges, but the type was sharp. My finger traced down the lines until I stopped cold. Use of common amenities must be administered fairly and without discrimination among residents. I read it again. Louder this time, as if the rafters needed to hear. Fairly. Without discrimination. Mia appeared in the doorway, sweater wrapped tight around her shoulders. You're still out here. I looked up, my hand still flat on the paper. They said in the email they were being fair, but it's right here, Mia. It's in the deed. They don't just get to claim it. They're bound by it. She stepped closer, eyes narrowing at the clause. So what does that mean? It means, I said slowly, my chest tightening with something that felt almost like hope, we're not powerless. She reached out, brushing dust from the corner of the page. Do you think this can really help? I folded the deed back into its envelope with care. It's more than help. It's proof. Emma's sleepy voice came from behind her mother. She rubbed her eyes, hair tangled. Daddy, are you fixing the house? I smiled, faintly, sliding the envelope onto the highest shelf. Something like that, sweetheart. The garage was quiet again except for the bulb buzzing overhead. I stood there in the half-dark heart, thudding the word fairly echoing in my head. The email had tried to slam a door, but here in brittle ink from decades past was a crack of daylight. And daylight, no matter how small, can grow. The garage always smelled faintly of oil and old sawdust, a perfume I had lived with for decades. It clung to the pegboard tools and the concrete floor, even the cardboard boxes stacked high in the corner. That night, under the weak yellow glow of the single bulb, Ruth laid the county plat across my workbench as if it were a sacred document. The paper crackled as she smoothed the corners with both palms. Her glasses slid down her nose and she pushed them back up with the edge of her pen. Here, she said, tapping a boundary line. This shading means the HOA doesn't extend over this section. It's outside their jurisdiction. I leaned closer, calloused fingers tracing the line as though it were a trail map through wilderness. My heart thudded in my ears. So, this part of my property, the back corner, it's mine outright. Not just yours, Ruth replied, voice low but firm. It's county recorded. They can't enforce rules on what doesn't belong to them. For weeks, humiliation had been my shadow. Emails dismissed without explanation. Notices plastered with stiff legal language, Elaine's smirk each time she passed me at the mailbox row. Every encounter had chipped away at me. Yet, here, under this dim light, the plat glowed like a lifeline. I could see it in my mind, the rusted boundary pin I had stumbled across years ago while digging holes for azaleas. Back then, it meant nothing more than property lines. Tonight, it was the anchor of my future. That pin, Ruth said, reading my expression, is your stake in the ground. Don't let them tell you otherwise. The garage grew quiet. The bulb hummed, filling the silence with a nervous electricity. A wrench hanging above the bench caught the light gleaming like it wanted to be used. My chest tightened, but not from fear. For the first time in weeks, I felt a certainty creeping in like dawn through curtains. From the porch outside, the swing creaked under the night breeze. Its rhythm was old and patient, like the neighborhood itself waiting for something to change. I looked up at Ruth. She had always been a steady presence in our county part teacher part, watchdog part neighbor. Why are you helping me with this? Her smile was small but real, because I've seen this pattern before. Folks like Anna twisting rules, families like yours paying the price. Most give up. You haven't. And that matters. Fight doesn't mean much if they have all the paperwork, I said, my hand still on the map. She tapped the margin with her pen. Then you fight with better paperwork. This plat predates their bylaws. County trumps HOA. Use it. I opened a drawer and pulled out a folder spilling old receipts across the bench. Hardware slips, lumber invoices faded. Warranty sheets, paper smelling of graphite and time. Ruth studied them like a curator. You've built half this county's porches and decks, she said. Maybe now it's time to build something for yourself. And for your kids. Her words struck deeper than I expected. She had a way of framing truth like she was holding up a mirror. Paperwork, she was saying, could be my hammer. Truth could be my nails. The bulb flickered, buzzing louder as if underlining the choice before me. I pulled the stool forward and sat the county plat stretched under my arms. Ruth handed me her pen. Its weight felt heavier than steel. The signature line waited at the bottom, a space where my name could transform doubt into decision. My hand hovered, fingers trembling. From the doorway, Mia's voice broke the silence. Nolan, she said softly. A cardigan wrapped around her shoulders. Whatever you choose tonight, we're with you. Behind her, I caught the faintest glimpse of Emma's teddy bear dangling from her hand, her sleepy eyes peeking past her mother's leg. The sight rooted me more than any map could. I looked back at Ruth. She didn't push. She just nodded as though she already knew the outcome. The smell of oil and metal mixed in the air, grounding me. The plat seemed to hum with possibility. My chest rose as I drew in a breath. The pen hovered for one more heartbeat, and then I pressed it to the page. The ink seeped into the fibers, black and permanent. I'll build, I said, voice steady now. The words echoed against the rafters louder than any HOA notice, louder than the hum of the bulb. Ruth's lips curved into a smile that felt like a seal of approval. That night I carried the signed plat into the house, slid it into the envelope with our deed, and tucked it on the highest shelf in the closet. For once I didn't feel like a man boxed in by rules. I felt like a man ready to carve space out of stone. Out on the porch swing, the night air pressed warm against my skin. I closed my eyes and listened to the creak of the chain, the whisper of leaves. Tomorrow would bring more notices, more sneers, more opposition. But tonight, with a plat signed and a plan forming, I finally had my foundation. The envelope was heavier than it should have been, and the words stamped in red across the top left corner hit me like a hammer, cease and desist. I tore it open at the kitchen table, the paper trembling in my hands. Unauthorized construction violation of community covenants subject to fines and enforcement action. The phrases crawled off the page, sharp as barbed wire. My chest burned. Mia leaned over my shoulder, her breath caught. "They're trying to scare us," I muttered. Emma peeked from the hallway. "Daddy, are we in trouble again?" I folded the paper before she could read more. No sweetheart, not us, just them trying to play games. But my voice didn't carry the calm I wanted. Later that night, the house was quiet. The pump motor in the yard clicked on a steady hum that filled the silence like a heartbeat. I stood at the window staring at the backyard where my plans waited in chalk lines and stakes. The hum felt like reassurance, but my stomach still knotted. Ruth arrived the next morning, clutching another stack of papers. She looked tired but determined. They filed fast. But we're not without tools. She spread out a form across my counter. At the top, temporary restraining order, application. "They're overreaching," she said, "and you have proof." Proof. I thought of the small black camera I had bolted to the side gate weeks ago, half expecting it never to matter. But 2 nights ago, at exactly 03:15, its lens had caught them a pair of HOA patrol volunteers slipping through the fence, clipboards in hand, snapping pictures of my half-dug trench. I pulled out the USB stick, slid it into my laptop. The screen froze on their figures in grainy night vision. Elaine's outline was clear enough, her short haircut, her clipboard angled toward my lawn. The timestamp glowed 03:15 a.m. At 3:15, Ruth said quietly, "Truth lit the frame." We carried the stills to the county office, the morning already warm. The counter smelled faintly of waxed wood and paper dust. A clerk in a navy vest squinted at the documents, tapping them into neat piles. Behind us, the low notes of choir rehearsal drifted from the church next door, faint echoes that carried through the hallway like reminders of community. Ruth leaned close to me as the clerk stamped the form. "They tried to claim you were trespassing on your own property. This will put that claim back in their lap." The clerk slid a paper toward me. "Sign here. The request for a TTRO will be reviewed by the judge this afternoon." I held the pen, its tip shaking above the line. Another cliff edge, another breathless pause. Back in the hall, the fluorescent lights hummed, echoing the steady pump back home. I sat on the bench with the folder in my lap. Ruth placed a hand on my arm. "Every builder knows you need a foundation before the frame. This is your foundation." Hours later, we returned. The clerk met us with a manila envelope. "The judge reviewed your materials. Temporary restraining order granted." My fingers tightened around the packet. Inside were the stamped pages, formal and undeniable. For the first time, it felt like the balance shifted. That evening, Mia read the document aloud at the table, her voice shaking but proud. "The HOA is hereby restrained from interfering until further review." Jason's eyes widened. "So they can't just walk in anymore, not without breaking the law," I said. I set the packet down, keys jingling as I locked the drawer. Prop teased, partial but potent. Protection on paper, not yet final, but enough to push back. Later, as I tucked the kids into bed, Emma whispered, "So, we're safe now." I smoothed her blanket, forcing a smile. For now, yes, but inside I knew safety was temporary. Still in my pocket, the folded TTRO felt heavier than steel, and on my laptop the still frame glowed a frozen second where their lies had been caught. The photo didn't just prove they had stepped out of line, it proved we weren't powerless anymore. The inspector bent down by the pump house, dipped a test strip into the clear water, and everyone on the block seemed to stop breathing at once. Mia's hand tightened on mine. Folding chairs scraped against grass as neighbors leaned forward, plates of potluck casserole untouched on their laps. Even the kids hushed the splash pad still for the first time all summer. The strip shifted colors slowly, inching toward perfect compliance. My heart thudded with each shade. "Levels are steady," the inspector said finally, his voice carrying across my backyard like a sermon. "Filtration exceeds requirement." A collective exhale rose from the crowd, almost musical. The pump's low hum filled the silence that followed, steady as a hymn. Ruth nodded from her chair, eyes meeting mine with the quiet pride of a teacher watching a student solve the hardest problem. "They can't twist this, Nolan. Numbers don't lie." I thought back to the boundary pin buried in the soil, the first clue that our land was different. Then, the deed clause we had unearthed in the garage box. Together, they had carried me to this moment, proofs layered like bricks in a wall that Anna and her board could no longer scale. The inspector knelt again, scribbling notes on his clipboard. His pen hovered above the signature line. Everyone leaned forward. Jason whispered, "Dad, is this it?" I swallowed, voice low. "It's the truth, son. Let's see if they're brave enough to write it down." The air was heavy with summer heat and barbecue smoke. Maria set down a plate of dumplings on the table, untouched. Carlos clutched a styrofoam cup of lemonade, eyes locked on the clipboard. Even the mailman, who had paused on his evening route, stood frozen by the gate cap in hand. The inspector tapped his pen once, twice. Then he signed. The sound was faint, but it carried like a gavel strike. He looked up. "I'll file this tonight. You'll have a stamped copy in the morning. For now, this property and its facilities meet every code." The cheer that erupted wasn't polite. It was thunderous raw. Folding chairs clattered as people stood. Someone clapped in rhythm, and others joined until the backyard pulsed with applause. My kids whooped, running in circles around the splash pad, their laughter cutting through weeks of tension. I blinked hard, swallowing a lump. For the first time, humiliation gave way to vindication. "Compliance never sounded this sweet," I whispered. Ruth chuckled, repeating it louder so the crowd could hear. The line spread like wildfire laughter, mixing with relief. Later, the inspector handed me a carbon copy of the field report. The paper was warm from his hand. The header stamped bold inspection report. Passed. He shook my hand firmly. "Not every neighborhood gets this right. You did." Mia tucked the copy into the folder with the deed and the TTRO. She touched my shoulder. "You built this," she said. Her eyes glistened. By nightfall, screenshots of the report were already posted on the neighborhood bulletin board tacked next to garage sale flyers and choir announcements. Proof undeniable, visible to all. As I stepped out to look at the glowing porch lights and hear the chatter across lawns, the pump's steady hum carried into the night. It was no longer just machinery. It was a heartbeat, ours. Ben cleared his throat, lifted the paper so the room could see the seal, and read in a steady voice that carried to the back wall. "Preliminary injunction granted." The words struck the community hall like a bell. Air moved hushed, startled, relieved all at once. The podium's mic wasn't even on. He didn't need it. Outside, the evening smelled like someone's smoker's sweet hickory, and pepper drifting through the open windows, the scent of a neighborhood that had decided to show up. He continued, careful as a carpenter measuring twice. "Pending full review, the association is restrained from interfering with Mr. Hale's permitted improvements or entering his property without consent." Mia squeezed my hand. Ruth, a row back, closed her eyes like someone hearing a long-awaited hymn. From the right aisle, a chair creaked. Elaine sat, rigid arms folded over a gray blazer despite the heat, staring at the floor. A few of her allies kept their eyes on their folded agendas, lips thin. Ben lowered the paper. "A copy will be posted on the bulletin board and circulated by email tonight." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Someone in the back whispered, half laughing, half awed. "About time." "Quiet, please," the interim chair said, though you could hear the smile in it. Ben looked at me. "Evan, would you join maintenance at the pool gate?" We stepped out together into the fading light. The chain-link fence rattled in a small breeze. The maintenance tech, Curtis, a quiet man I'd hired years ago for a deck rebuild, held a metal box and a neat set of cylinders. He nodded, eyes kind. "Old cylinder first," he said. The tech's screwdriver bit into the worn brass. Screws came free with a soft sigh. The hall behind us hummed with voices. From somewhere down the block, the church choir practiced low harmonies slipping over the hedges. The world felt strangely still in the middle of so much sound. The old lock dropped into Curtis's gloved palm. "New one," he said, and slid the fresh cylinder into the gate. "Wait," Elaine called from the doorway, voice sharp enough to nick skin. "You can't make unilateral." Ben didn't raise his voice. "This change implements the court's order." Elaine's jaw tightened. "This is a travesty of—" A neighbor's whisper reached me at the fence line, unguarded and tired. 2 days after Elaine's basement turned into a pool. Maybe now she understands drains. A ripple of murmurs followed, then faded. Curtis fit the new lock home. The polished metal caught a scrap of sunset. He turned the key once. Click. The sound was small, but it rang clean, decisive. In my chest, something heavy loosened. Inside the hall, someone lowered the mic and spoke into the quiet. "We'll await the maintenance report." It wasn't necessary. We had all heard the report land in the space between that click and the evening air. "Keys," Ben said. Curtis set the ring on the table by the gate. The circle of metal chimed against laminate, a bright little sound that made heads turn. I picked up the ring. It felt heavier than it looked weighty, the way decisions are. We took them back to the hall. The podium's edge was nicked from years of meetings, budget debates, vendor selections, the 1,000 tiny acts of trying to live together. I set the ring down in front of the interim facilities chair. The metal kissed wood, and the room went quiet again. Ben placed the injunction beside it, index finger resting on the seal. "The order," he said, "is operative as of 5:13 p.m. Elaine stood papers trembling. "You're setting a dangerous precedent. This community," a father near the back, voice steady, "this community just followed the law." Another voice, older woman, crisp, "and will keep doing so." Elaine's mouth opened-closed. She sank back into her chair, eyes flaring, then flattening. I looked down at the keys and the embossed seal. Weeks ago, their letters had driven me into the ground. Tonight, our letters lifted us out. Mia's whisper brushed my shoulder. "Say it." My mouth was dry. I took a breath that tasted like smoke and lemon-iced tea drifting in from the side tables. "Justice," I said softly. Mostly to myself, clicks louder than chains. Ruth heard and smiled. Ben did too. A few folks near the front repeated it, unsure at first, then firmer justice, clicks louder than chains. The interim chair cleared her throat. "We need to define immediate procedures." "Curtis," he stood cap in hand. "The new cylinder is logged. 2 master keys issued. Spares will be cut only with facilities authorization. We'll sign them out now." I slid the ring across the table close enough for everyone to see, but still within my touch. The chair took a pen poised over the sign-out sheet. The pen tip hovered. The room held another breath. She signed her name, measured, careful. Then she turned the sheet toward me. "You witnessed I did," I said and signed. The keys stayed on the table between us, gleaming under fluorescent light that had been buzzing all meeting. The buzz faded into the background like an air conditioner you only notice when it stops. Someone near the door whispered, "It's done." The words skittered around the room and settled. I lifted the injunction so the seal caught the light and looked out at faces that had been tight with worry for too long. We were not finished. Paperwork is a bridge, not a shore, but tonight we had crossed something. On our way out, the smell of barbecue rolled through the open doors. Plates clinked, a pitcher of tea knocked softly against a stack of cups. The choir's last chord drifted over the street and held in the warm air. At the threshold, Jason tugged my sleeve. "Do they still get to boss us around?" I squeezed his shoulder. "Not tonight." Back at the table, I rested my fingertips on the metal ring, felt its cool certainty, and spoke into the calm that followed. "The keys stay with us now." The hall was so full the walls seemed to lean in and listen. For 3 seconds, no one spoke. We held a shared breath that felt ceremonial, the sort of hush that comes before a hymn. The ceiling fans purred. A folding chair ticked. Then the interim treasurer lifted a stapled packet with the county seal and faced us. "This is the audit report," she said. 3 fiscal years. Expenditures, reimbursements, contracts. Her voice wobbled, steadied, and began to walk the numbers out into the room. Line by line, the picture sharpened. Landscaping invoices doubled without bids. Consulting checks with no scope attached. Reimbursements missing receipts altogether. Someone near the aisle whispered, "That's our money." Another voice, older, firmer, "We paid for that twice." The bulletin board behind the podium, crowded with choir schedules and bake sale flyers, seemed to stare back at us with its own paper truth. I felt the weight of my folder against my knee, the plat, the deed, the inspection copy proofs that had started as my family's defense and now echoed for every neighbor here. Ruth leaned closer, pencil poised on her notes. "The boundary and the deed opened the gate," she murmured. "This report walks through it." The treasurer paused to sip water. You could hear the church choir next door stop between songs, the last chord hanging in the hallway like a ribbon of light. She turned another page. Unauthorized event rentals. Equipment purchases outside policy. Transfers without board vote. Gasps, then the scrape of a pencil, then silence again. Elaine rose. The blazer was perfect. Her hands were not. She pressed her palms flat on the table as if the wood might steady her. "I accept responsibility for failures in oversight," she said. The words came out formal and small. "I apologize to this community for the harm, for the mistrust, for all of it." No one answered. The silence wasn't cruel. It was exacting. A silence that measured the distance between what should have been and what was. I let the breath leave my lungs slowly. Weeks of notices, late fees, and clipped tones at the mailbox row unspooled in my head and drifted away like old steam. On the page in my lap, the deed clause about fairness looked less like fine print and more like a promise kept. The chair cleared her throat. Motion to adopt the audit recommendations, restitution of overcharges, refund credits applied within 60 days, and a special election to reconstitute the board. She lifted her hand. All in favor, hands rose. 1, then 3, then 10. Calloused hands from the post office counter. Careful hands that had passed casserole pans down church aisles. Greased hands from the hardware shop. Different hands, same vote. The treasurer counted aloud. 17, 19, 24. The numbers clicked forward like a slow-moving odometer. We watched still as fence posts. At 29, the church choir resumed a soft, warm-up notes slipping through the doorway like kindness. The treasurer lifted her chin. 30, 31. A long pause. Curtis, the maintenance tech, raised his hand last. 32, she said. The room held one more breath, heavy and whole. I felt Mia's fingertips on my sleeve. Ruth's pencil stopped moving. Then the sound hit. Applause rose like weather sudden and sure, falling into rhythm until the paneled walls trembled with it. People stood. Chairs clattered. Relief shook loose from the rafters. Somewhere behind me a laugh turned into a sob and then into a laugh again. I stayed seated for a beat and listened to the applause, to the fans, to the buzz of the lights, to my own lungs refilling. Silence. Ruth whispered half prayer, half measurement, then thunderous unity. The line took root. I heard it repeated 2 rows up, then near the door, then at the podium itself, a phrase lifted and passed hand to hand like a lantern. The chair rapped the table lightly once. The motion carries. The full tally will be posted tonight on the bulletin board and emailed to all owners. Refund procedures will accompany the minutes. Thank you for your patience. Elaine sat again, eyes on the packet she had not opened. Her mouth made a shape like the beginning of another sentence, then closed. She nodded once barely and folded her hands. I stood because my legs told me to, because the moment required it. The folder in my grasp felt softer than it had when all this began. Not because the paper had changed, but because the weight had moved outward, shared. I turned so I could see as many faces as possible, the ushers from the choir. The mailman, still in uniform. Maria wiping her eyes with a napkin. Carlos rubbing his palms together like a pitcher warming up. My voice came out rougher than I planned, but it carried. We deserve better. Autumn light slanted across the grass and found the wooden plaque waiting on a small easel by the boundary pin. The bronze letters caught every bit of sun, throwing back a warm gleam that made the grain look almost alive. Someone had polished it this morning. I could smell lemon oil above the cooler notes of the lawn. Neighbors drifted in with casserole dishes and crock pots, steam lifting in soft ribbons. Folding tables lined the walk, name cards taped under serving spoons. Children walked the fence like a balance beam, careful today as if they understood a line had been drawn and honored. Carlos handed me a stack of programs. "You sure you don't want to say more?" "I think the paper will do most of the talking," I said, tapping the leather folder under my arm. Inside, the transfer order lay flat, heavy with embossed seals. Mia adjusted the cloth over a tray of baked ziti and lowered her voice. "You slept, didn't you?" "Some," I said. "Enough." From the flagpole at the corner, the rope clacked in the breeze. 3 measured taps, a pause, and another tap like a metronome, setting the pace for a ceremony we hadn't rehearsed but somehow knew. Ruth came up beside me, her smile small and steady. Ben's lining up the signatures. "When they hand it to you, let the silence land first." "You and your silences," I teased. "They do half the work," she said. The new board gathered at the sawhorse podium we'd set at the edge of the lawn. Curtis from maintenance stood with a small tray, 2 keys brass, bright as corn silk, resting on a folded napkin. Keys again. Not new, but newly ours. They were the last props in a play where paper had always been the main character. Ben took the mic, then clicked it off. He didn't need it. "Neighbors," he said, "we have before us the transfer order. It acknowledges the court's injunction, the audit's findings, the special election, and the formal handover of facilities management to the newly elected board." He nodded to me. I opened the folder and held the stamped page up so the seal flashed. The wind nudged the edge. I steadied it with my thumb. "I'll read the key line," Ben said. "Custody of keys and operational authority are transferred to the board seated on this date." Curtis stepped forward. The tray trembled once, then steadied. He looked to me, and I looked to Mia, who gave me the smallest nod. I reached out. The metal hummed in my palm, memory of the click from the hall memory of doors that had stayed shut too long. Around us, the crowd drew a breath and kept it. "Before we raise anything," Ben said, "we mark what brought us here." He gestured toward the easel by the boundary pin, the wooden plaque half-shrouded in cloth the color of late leaves. Maria set her casserole down like an offering and lifted the corner. She glanced back for permission. I nodded. The cloth fell. For a heartbeat, no one spoke. The carve work was simple, almost plain, but it felt exact. Maple, Glen shared by right, kept by fairness. Boundary, pin, deed, keys. Community transfer, autumn 2024. Somewhere behind us a child whispered, "Wow." Then the first hands met one clap, then 2. Then many, rolling out in a soft wave that didn't break the quiet so much as warm it. Ben cleared his throat. "We'll sign the order now." He set the document on the podium. The pen left its thin music on the page's name first, then Ruth's as witness, then the treasurer's, the secretary's, and at last mine. The ink sank in and didn't come back. When I finished, I rested the pen beside the keys and stepped back light-headed and grateful. The wind came up, and the flagpole rope clacked again, tap, 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 pause, tap. The kind of sound you notice only when a place is listening to itself. "Say it," Mia whispered. I looked at faces I'd learned like streets. The mailman still in uniform. Choir ushers in sweater vests. Kids with grass on their knees, retirees who had showed up every time something needed counting. My voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Legacy is louder than control. Ruth's eyebrows lifted and she smiled like a teacher hearing a student craft his own sentence. Ben echoed it once for the folks at the back, and the line moved through the cluster in small waves, not a chant, just a knowing. We served food. Plates clinked and the smell of casserole and cinnamon rolls settled on the lawn. A little girl in a denim jacket asked if she could touch the boundary pin. Gently, her mother said. The girl bent and tapped it twice with one finger as if greeting a small, stubborn star. By the bulletin board at the corner, Curtis posted the transfer order beneath the audit tally. The papers looked like they belonged together, one story, brought to an honest end, another line beginning. I walked the edge of the yard. The pump in the shed hummed low, faithful, almost domestic now. The camera by the gate caught sunlight and threw it down like confetti. For a second, I saw the last 3 months all at once, a wet violation notice at the mailbox, a deed unrolled on a garage bench, a timestamp frozen at 03:15, an inspector's pen hovering the click of a cylinder seating the hush before a vote, and now this bronze letters warming under autumn light. Elaine stood across the street, not close, not far. She watched for a while, hand on the strap of her bag, then turned and walked on. No words, just the measure of someone moving out of a story. "Neighbor," remarks Ben called. Maria lifted her paper plate. 2 refunds posted and keys accounted for. Carlos raised his cup. 2 rules applied fairly. Ruth tilted her head at the plaque. "To paper that holds." Mia put her hand in mine. "To a place that learned." Kids broke into a game along the sidewalk, bouncing between the splash pad and the grass as if there had never been a border at all. The flag climbed half a length and waited, rope clacking once more, a gentle punctuation. Ben looked to me. Last word, I ran my thumb along the plaque's edge and felt a splinter catch, then let go. I turned so the board, the neighbors, the rope, and the pin were all in my eye at once. "This is ours," I said, steady as I could make it forever. The autumn air carried the scent of casseroles while sunlight glinted off the restored keys resting on the table. Beside the flagpole where the rope clacked gently in the breeze, neighbors gathered around the posted transfer order and the plaque unveiled by the boundary pin. In that moment, we knew the struggle had given way to healing boundaries, reclaimed rules corrected, and a community stitched back together. Justice isn't loud. It's steady. And as laughter mixed with applause, I felt hope settle deeper than any decree. Share your HOA story below your map might help someone redraw theirs.